Well, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I left absolutely no stock in the Egyptian space. They didn't have the ability to buy anything, and I should have known that beforehand, but buying gold would have been painful because it meant piracy. Spending 18 treasure on nothing. Anyway, it's not that terrible. They're going to lose one city because they've pretty much been wiped out of everything else, but they could have lost a bunch of cities had someone... Oh, that's why they have none. They got hit with the iconoclasm and heresy, and it reduced all their cities, so they had a lot of pieces on the board. Gotcha. So it wasn't really their fault. Okay. Anyway, they're going to lose theirs, and I don't know who they're giving it to, but it looks like it has to be Italy. And everybody's going to pay taxes. Looks like another semi-non-warlike turn. People need to make cities this turn in order to not go back, basically. So like Egypt built 3 big cities. Now remember, they had this huge collapse of all their cities, which is the only reason they can do that. They had a lot of manpower, no cities. It's like at the beginning of the game. Normally, you're adding 1 or 2 cities a turn at most. Babylon built a city, Thrace built a city. All these people are kind of on that edge, and they think an extra production might push them over. Now, Babylon's probably in the best shape, so wherever there was any hostility, and there wasn't a lot, it was kind of directed against them. I think the Italians attacked here, but they also had to attack. This was really a very mellow turn so far. Alright, let's build these things and get the cards out. I wanted to note this before I forgot it though. Crete absolutely had to build a city as well, but they only have 2 population left afterwards. They were at the 8 number, which allows you to build 1 city. Now, you never do that at the beginning of the game. It's not worth it. But here, they're losing a space for every turn that they don't. So, maybe some disaster or something will give them some population. They're no longer anywhere near the bunny anymore. They're tied for last place in the horse race. So, nobody's going to hit them anymore, but it's very difficult to recover when you're in this kind of weak position. We saw Syria basically in that kind of position. Not quite as bad, but where they had to recover. And they've kind of managed to do so, and they're actually in the first spot in the horse race. And getting enough trade cards together, they might be able to make the limit this time. Anyway, poor Crete only gets 1 trading card, so they're going to be stuck in pretty much the same position they were. They picked that trading card up, it didn't match up. They don't really have anything to trade for a salt. A couple of ochre, nobody's going to take that. They know they're hoarding salt. No point in it. Unless there's some really great... I mean, if somebody has all the ochre or something, maybe they'd do it. Alright. Something I never see in a real game, an opposed game, and that I've seldom seen triggered in one of my solitaire trading type of adventures, is there was this real unwillingness to trade. Basically, if you thought you were giving someone else an advantage and you couldn't crack the barrier, and most people were in the position where one trade that looked decent, they couldn't manage that. So for example, Crete and Egypt had a potential trade between them advantageous to both of them. I don't know if Egypt could have cracked the barrier, but Crete looked at it and said, I can't, I miss by a few bucks either way. I'm not going to make the trade. Just to prevent Egypt from cracking their barrier. Of course, Crete has a problem too. They also didn't want to cut a deal with Babylon, which they knew would give them a disaster. The value was like 4 cards, spice 63. Well, that's 3 spice and what else? You know, a 0. And it was pretty clear they're getting a disaster, which they couldn't survive. That would send them back a space. They didn't want to do that. So basically the idea, actually Crete might have been able to buy their card, but it doesn't matter. They're not at the barrier, so they would be giving up the advance to Egypt. Anyway, what ended up happening, only one power managed to buy anything at all. Babylon, unable to make any trades, but had fallen into enough cards over time to have barely bought philosophy that you see there. And now they're pushing forward, and that pretty much means they win the game. Absolutely guaranteed? No. People can still do stuff on the board, etc., to try to wipe them out. And I don't know where their points are, but that extra 400 points may be kind of difficult. So we'll see how that all falls out. I got some disasters to take care of, though. An interesting finish here. Assyria had an earthquake, which they slammed. The grain's still not getting turned in. You can see what not trading does, and that's a part of what the problem here is. These people don't seem to get along very well as most groups they do, but they're also playing a much more cutthroat game. Anyway, Assyria destroyed a Cretan city with their earthquake. They didn't have to do this. They could have taken over here and lost less people, one less person. But their claim was, well, this is better for me anyway, plus it knocks you back, and haha, that's terrible for you. Well, Crete was already starting to say, you know, this guy's an asshole, and I'm going to hurt him. At this point, Babylon says, hey, I'm your buddy. I'm going to give you the civil war and prevent you from going back further. So Crete ended up gaining. Babylon had to give it to someone, and it was really either Crete or Italy as the two losing players. Babylon gave it to Crete as kind of a consolation prize, and now Crete's got some nice cities in play. Quite often what I see when you have these civil wars in a real game is people start cutting these deals like, oh yeah, I'll give it to you, but you pick these things and stuff like that. Well, I very seldomly do that kind of action, kind of diplomacy in it, but when I play solitaire. But you know, it's a part of the game quite often. Anyway, what do we have going forward? Well, the only person who broke the limit is Babylon, so they're going forward. But we also see Italy and Crete catching up some of their distance because they have cities. Crete almost went back though. All right. See what how close we are to that 1400. We know we're just over the 1,000, but the question is how much. Are we above 1,100, for example? That could make a big difference. If we're not, it might be very hard to make that 1,400 cut. Okay, Babylon's total is 1175. That means they need to come up with 225 more points. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. No more cards they can buy. They can't grab democracy. So, 225 is kind of tough. They've got to collect a big set this turn and next turn. No, this turn. Because they can't even enter if they don't have that value, if I'm correct. I believe that's the case. Yeah, he can't even enter without that point. So he's got to make 225 points this turn, and that can only be in trade cards and cash. He's not going to do that. So everybody's got another turn to kind of catch up to him here. And some of them have cheaper limits here. And this, again, this is where the expanded trade cards, you never face this kind of decision. You never face this kind of trouble. For whatever it is. But the whole game's been more troubled. Alright. Well, although the Babylonians have sort of carved out a certain, I don't know, lead in the position just by pushing forward, they've got a hard path ahead of them to make that 1,400. I don't think they're going to make the extra 225 on one turn. That would take a lot of trading. Which means everybody else can kind of say, let's not trade with them. Let's trade amongst ourselves. We're all waiting to cross that barrier, basically. Which is kind of a strong point in terms of bargaining. They still have some cards, though. That's the problem. We're seeing not a lot of military opposition to them because they moved late in the turn. Only Italy and Egypt moved after them. And you can see the Italians, yeah, the Italians who happen to have most of their population in the Near East now after they build this city. You can see most of the people really are building cities. Not a lot of violence here. Not a lot of opportunity for knocking anyone out. Nobody was in that really weak position. And most importantly, the person they wanted to hit, Babylon, is not in that weak position. Alright, so onward. Well, last turn nobody managed to trade the gold. Collect it all. It basically stayed scattered. Deals just weren't being made last turn. This turn I think people are going to have to make deals. Everybody should have a richer hand. But because people hoarded, they didn't get as much this time. Also, Thrace is the only country making that 6 or more boost. And so they've got this collection of just this mishmash of cards because they had significantly less before and they made it up this time. They lost their 9th city. They actually would have gotten that piracy out of the way had they had one more guy on the map or something, but they needed to take people instead. So nobody bought the piracy card that's left. That's the only card that's left, and that puts people at risk of a revolt for next turn. But you know, everybody's kind of got this, if I can just squeeze out enough money, you know, every little treasury drop counts or whatever in this one. And that's just becoming so apparent in the game. Anyway, Egypt's going to start off the trading, and we'll see if it works out at all well for them. Okay, so after trade, we have some big movements here. Egypt picked up law, which is all they need. In fact, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They'd be in trouble if it wasn't all they need, because they're full of cards, but they barely clear it. They got a reasonably easy chart, not the easiest in the world. Africa's is a little easier, but they're going forward and Africa's not. Africa should be going forward next turn though, so it's going to be kind of a race between the two of them if it comes down to that. Babylon couldn't make any deals, but who could? Well, the biggie here, Crete made its deal, picked up philosophy. I think it's full 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Got a lot of points. Got to be close to that 1200. Problem? In getting it, they made a deal with Babylon and grabbed an epidemic in that. And they're going to suffer that. They may go backwards this turn. It looks very likely. They don't have a lot of points on the board, and they're going to be taking a pretty big hit, even though they have medicine. 11 points plus the Civil War. Well, the Civil War comes first. I don't know if they're big enough to be affected by it. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 20. They're probably not big enough to be affected by the Civil War. Either way, they'll be at around 35 or less when they get hit with the epidemic. And that may knock them down to no cities. And then they're in trouble if they've got none. They may be able to survive with a city, though. And they're far enough back that I don't think anyone's going to hit them. Our other advancing power is Thrace, who managed to pick up philosophy. They still have room for democracy. They could have actually picked up democracy instead of philosophy. Kept a hand of like 4 cloth. Powerful hand. But the problem is, they do that, they don't go forward. They were like, I don't remember how much, 35 points short of their 1,000. Now they're 5 points higher than their 1,000 because they took philosophy. But it did really pillage their hand. They still have a gems, but who's going to hit 8 cities? I mean, we're seeing something. You know, this is funny. I remember this from my early days of playing. Nobody ever hits 8 or 9 cities. And then, once I played with those advanced trade cards, man, people were sitting up there dinging the high-valued stuff all the time. So not only does it you know, the lack of catastrophes increases the amount of cities that everybody has, which increases the trading, and it speeds the whole game up. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of room for really dicky maneuvers like we've been seeing in this game. And there's not a lot of room for clever gameplay. And things are kind of linked. If you can make good trades, and if you can be persuasive and you hold Assyria, which I almost always did, you're going to place within the first couple players. Whereas if you hold Egypt, you're probably going to get screwed. Babylon, similarly. So what I found was generally, with the advanced trade cards, you could pretty much, there were a few powers that were worth having, and a whole bunch that weren't. and if you were in the bunch that weren't, you weren't going to win. And if you were in the few that were, and you were competent, you pretty much could assure it. I don't feel like that's the case with this game. I feel like this is a better game, but I'm not sure it's as much fun. And I'll hit that during my review, definitely. Because there's something fun about the original one. You didn't have to work too hard. You didn't have all this screwage potential. But, wow, this one stretches out even longer, I think, than the 1 hour per player that we were used to with the expanded cards. Let's say... I guess that's it. I got to take care of these calamities. Wow, we got a flood over here with Thrace, and he got himself off the Nile, so he's going to get hit over here. That's kind of painful for him. Everybody's got little problems coming their way. We'll see how it all turns out. Okay, so the net effect, well, famine is the killer. There's no question. That's the thing that just demolishes people. Italy got hit with it. You can see they're down to 2 cities now. They schwacked Egypt with it. And I don't remember who else. I think Babylon with the rest. I'm not sure. But, you know, just everybody's getting hammered by these, the recurrent cycle. There's no chance to build up as much as you usually do in the game because you're just getting hit again and again, and you're trying to maintain your city size so that you get the trade cards so you can make the deals that you want. By doing that, you make yourself more vulnerable to some of the problems. Whereas when they come a little slower, it's not as devastating. You generally have a large population that makes you safe from it. You can build that back up, and your cities just remain because of it. Let's see who goes forward. Africa did not make the hump. Italy gets to go forward. They've got no problems. Thrace made their hump. They go forward, and they've got a nice little path. Crete survives, so they go forward. They kept a couple of cities. Assyria did not. Babylon is not at 1400. And Egypt cranks forward. So now everybody is tied except poor Babylon. Well, tied being a little bit relative, because there's people like Assyria and Italy and Africa who haven't broken the barrier yet. And some of them are clearly in questionable shape. Italy, for example, with just a couple cities, probably not going to go forward this turn. Look at their population. They have a couple of people there, a couple of people there, scattered. They got hit with this famine and hit hard. All right, up this one goes, but we feel like the end is in sight. There's people who've broken the 1,000 barrier, and some of those people don't have a lot more to go. And you can't restrict trade anymore. It's not a matter of, oh yeah, I can't break the 1,000, so the hell with the rest of you. I'm not going to trade with you. It's a matter of, I've got to make that 1,300, or I've got to make that 1,400, or whatever, so I've got to trade with people. You can refuse to trade with Babylon because they're a point ahead. But beyond that, I think we're going to continue to see trading between the players. All right, let's go.